I really sat there in awe of him and so thankful that he has that experience, that he has fallen in love with school, fallen in love with education, with the entire journey, understands that his education isn't a linear journey, which is impressive because he's, a sophomore in high school. But it's just so impressive to me because, you heard my story, and very traditional. I had no say in anything. Anytime there was a creative outlet for me, I was literally told, you didn't do that. You copied that. That's not yours. Your parents did that. I'm like, damn. Like, my parents were like the least creative people anywhere, and they still are. Like, my mom can't draw to save her life. And so it was just so like soul crushing as a child to finally, be so tortured to write that that paper on Benjamin Franklin, like every girl's dream, is to write a paper on Benjamin Franklin. And like my mom, because again, I was not the best student, so my mom calling me over and over to revise and edit and revise and edit. And finally it got to the point where it's like, okay, not embarrassing to turn in. So she's like, okay, you're done. So then I would like sketch his face, and every line, every wrinkle was so perfect, every strand of hair. And then to be told, and like so excited to turn it in to my teachers as a fourth grader, right? So excited, knowing that like the cover's the best part because what's inside is probably not that great. And to be told like, you didn't do that, come on. I'm like, man, so I'm so excited that so many educators are here to kind of change that trajectory for so many kids, because it really is so important. And there are so many kids that wake up every day and like they're living the experience that I lived, right? So thank you for being here so we can try to change that and have more, children like the sophomore that I just met who's like mind-blowing.
They're amazing, right? What about you, Walter? What's up top of mind for you?
Uh,
I think you're good.
is it good?
Yeah.
Good? Okay, bet. I guess just gratefulness. I appreciate educators, and I have to say that I wouldn't be here without the trust and mentorship that the adult educators that were on my path, the love, the support, just all that they showed. And so yeah, like thank you all for the work. I love that I'm the youngest in this room right now. And
Yes.
Says who? Says who?
And so with that, I really want to bring a fresh perspective to this conversation and uniqueness through I am the community that like I aim to serve. And so, yeah, I looking forward to this conversation. And again, just thank y'all for the work. It's very challenging. But as I said in my keynote, as long as we could build the bridges between our divides, then I think that anything is possible.
Oh, that's right. For me, what's top of mind right now as I serve 210 schools, 90,000 students in urban America is post-pandemic, right? When I talk to families and students all over the city of Los Angeles almost every day, and our families and our kiddos are hurting. They're not in a good place. So me as a superintendent, my job, if I'm not going to follow the status quo, which I do not plan on doing, is to how do I innovate? How do I inspire? How do I make sure that our students have the opportunities to thrive and be successful like Walter, right? How do I make sure that we have the understanding of what's needed, right? How do we make sure that we don't bury books like we're doing in some parts of the country right now? How we're burying certain educational philosophies in certain parts of the country right now. How do I inspire those teachers and make sure that those students get licensed to be heard, right? They get licensed, their right to have their voice heard, right? To be able to create, to be able to problem solve, to be able to be critical thinkers. So right now, top of mind for me is coming out of this nasty pandemic, and especially in large urban cities. I know we're coming from all over the world here, but places like Los Angeles, where the majority of our students in public school are underserved, whether it's poverty, whether it's they may be English learners, they may be Latinx, Black, they might have issues because they're identifying with LGBTQ communities. How do we serve those students in the way that they should be served? So that's what's top of mind for me, gang. What do we do coming out of the pandemic so that Walter is not an anomaly? When Walter is like, what's new? right? Isn't that crazy to even think? Who would even think of such a thing, right? Because he's so extraordinary, his experience and what he brings to the conversation and what he's bringing to the community, right? But shouldn't our job be to where this isn't as extraordinary?
Yeah.
That's my thought.
And we need more people like you said, that you're not going to do status quo, right? Because I met his principal that allowed him to do
Tony.
that work, right? And so
Shout
if
out
he
Tony.
didn't have that principal, that leader in his life, or that educator in his life that allowed him to do that work, it would have never happened. I am the teacher I am today because of the principals that I've had. So my last principal that I mentioned in my speech, Teresa Stupas, and she's how I know Caleb, and I've been here before through her. And if it wasn't for her and then my current principal that I have right now, that the trust they have in me, that I'm going to do what's right for the kids, even if it's not on the district calendar. Oh my gosh, I'm not doing what benchmark says, right? So even if it's not on the district calendar, they know I'm doing it for a purpose, and I have reason behind why I'm doing that work. But it's because of support from administrators and from, oh my goodness, I couldn't even imagine, superintendent that believes in this type of deeper learning. So hopefully you're all here because you have that support from administration, from other teachers, or even higher up from your district, because that means without that, I had 2 teachers come to my classroom right before spring break. They took time out of their spring break from Jacksonville to come down to North Palm Beach. It's like a 4.5, 5-hour drive to spend the day in my classroom. I was so honored and shocked that 2 teachers wanted to do that on their spring break. And they loved it. And they went back to their classrooms and they tried to implement some of the STEM activities and deeper learning that was going on in my classroom. And they got, why aren't you doing what's on the calendar? So, and it breaks my heart because they don't have the supports. We need more people like you in schools, that it comes from the top down, right? So because of that support, we're able to teach and do what's best for kids and give them that deeper learning. So we get more amazing students like Walter that come out of schools.
But isn't that something too, thinking about how you're mentoring there? You say the teachers came and they're able to see this amazing
Open door
work that you're
policy.
doing, right?
Yeah.
But that mentorship and then that advocacy, what else would you tell teachers? Because for me, that's why we're here. Almost to train the trainer, right? All these great folk are going to go back to the school and then they're going to have that critical eye and say, we should be doing it a little differently, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about expanding the work, in the space that you're in?
So I currently work with teachers on our school grounds within our building. And then I work with other schools in Palm Beach County, and we do trainings over the summer. And so, we are doing that work. And for those teachers that are afraid to try it, I would say, give it some time. Because just because I'm not using the math book doesn't mean my kids aren't passing math tests. Just because I'm not following the prescribed curriculum like it's a Bible doesn't mean my children aren't passing and exceeding they are scoring above the school district. So my students are constantly scoring above the district, whether it's in reading or whether it's in math, but we're doing it through deeper learning. And I feel like I want to be like, that's why. That's why their scores are showing, because they're learning the work in a meaningful way. And I feel like, I'm always going to have an open door policy. I always want people to come in my room, to come to my school, to see the work, to see the children that are so engrossed that I'm telling you, I've had, again, a labeled child come to my room within the last month because the teacher couldn't handle him. They were parents were ready to go to the district, get him out of that classroom, nightmare of a child, right? Nightmare of a child. So the principal's like, can you take him? I said, absolutely. Let's do it. Within the first week, do we have to go to recess? Do we have to go to recess?
Right.
Is it time? Oh my gosh, it's time to go. Because guess what? He's doing meaningful work for the first time. He's blogging about Pokemon. Who cares what he's blogging about? You know, it's something that's interesting to him. He's frantically writing. He's having to collaborate with his partner. He's having to work with, we have a student editor. So he's having to work with the editor because I'm not solely in charge in my room. I never said, you know, I never claimed to be, right? I'm the lead learner. I learn alongside them. So I'm constantly working with other teachers, and it's not always easy. And like I said in my speech, like, you are going to fail, but wouldn't you rather fail forward and keep going than constantly standing still, right? We're never going to get anywhere unless we try. And me failing forward, my peers failing forward, shows my students it's okay if they fail forward too, right? Like, we have to teach that growth mindset, and that, you know, we learn from our mistakes. If we're not failing, then we're not really learning. Imagine the student that sails through school. What have they really learned?
I just resonate with everything that y'all are saying. That's actually why the work that I'm leading has gone so far, because of the trust, the bridge that we build between the adults who have been here, who have walked the path longer than the young people who are going through it, and coming to an agreement that we may not know what the plan looks like to break some like some of these what did I say, like school to prison pipeline, the cycles just keeping us in these oppressive ways of living. And this is supposed to be a conversation, so I would love to hear some ideas maybe from y'all as well. But I'm the only young person in this room. What would it take for there to be more young people in this room, in your school, in the community, for y'all to be able to trust them and know that y'all could execute work together on a massive level, not just in the classroom, not just maybe in the school, but policy, statewide, community decision making. I really believe that I'm not just in the nonprofit of business. I'm in the business of creating a healthy ecosystem for the whole community. And so I would love to hear some ideas from y'all as well. But I will say it again, I'm the only young person in this room. How can we get more of me in this room?
It's only going to be, you're going to be the only young person if you say that again, because we feel young. I'm teasing, Walter. I think he's right, though, when we start talking about policy at the state levels and our government levels, and of course in our classrooms and our school. I think he's absolutely right. Me personally, I can't speak for the entire panel. I think it's one class at a time, one mind at a time. When we had the Center for Love and Justice come and partner with us in what was formerly called Local District Central, where I was before I became superintendent, we had about 85,000 students, about 165 schools. And no one in Los Angeles was talking about anti-racist deeper learning. No one was talking about this idea of releasing the power to the student. Like Kristin just says, I'm not in charge, I'm the lead learner, right? I facilitate. So I believe that happens one classroom at a time, but I believe then one district at a time, then one state at a time. Because to be honest with you, it is changing hearts and minds. Traditional school. When I was in school, this was unheard of. Some of the good folk here, right, this is new to them. They're like, what are you talking about? That I'm not, in charge of the class and we don't have to have a traditional way of learning. And then to be quite honest with you, there are times when the district says, they don't care how well you're doing, how come you're not on pace with benchmark or DIBELS or getting ready for Smarter Balance or these assessments, right? So it's this what we call polarity, right? How do I manage being a good Kristin and still being the superintendent when everything is going to be measured by how the kids do on the test, right? When we do have to deal with the newspapers saying, oh, you suck, Spicer. The schools are performing 0.5% worse than they did last year. What's the problem, right? So, but it resonates with me what you're saying, because I know it's at every level of leadership. Right, from the governor to superintendents, of course, to our teachers, our cafeteria workers, our custodial staff. Everyone has to believe, right, that this space is better than traditional space. Because we have to, like I said, in my times talking, we have to meet the students where they are, right? At the time when I was in high school, it may necessarily not have been deeper learning, but it was that connection actually, that is deeper learning, that mentorship, that connection with Miss Bankson that changed my life, right? You have to touch someone, but it's hard changing hearts and minds, right? That's why I think that it's just so important that leaders like yourself, continue to press, continue to push the envelope, right? And showing the way. Because I was a teacher for many years, right? And we had every kind of training you could think of, this and that and the third. It doesn't always resonate with you. Sometimes you're just sitting there going, okay, we're done, right? So we have to show other teachers why this works, why this is important, how it works. That's why High Tech High is such an exemplar, because they can show how it's work, and then that's leapfrogged into other institutions as well. So I hope that gives some context. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, I agree, really, with everything. And, you know, I feel like maybe too, also, like Walter, like your organization getting out into the schools and showing students what's possible. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless they're in a situation where they have a teacher that is really showing them that they can be a change agent in the world, they don't know that that option is out there for them, right? Like, my students understand that they can cause change because of the work that they've done. Mm-hmm. So they would be more likely to then go up into 3rd, 4th high school and feel like they have that power inside of them because they've been there. But unless, you know, I think even for them to see you and hear your story and mm-hmm. see the work that your organization is doing, and then they're going to be like, that kid looks like me.
Right.
Right? Like, that's going to get more kids.
I'm curious because I've personally walked in and seen the potential of what comes from putting the student at the epicenter from like high school forward. What have you seen starting earlier, and like how would you say like it's a difference from getting them when it might be a little bit too late, when they're closer to a statistic, than to like in the first, like 2nd, 3rd grade? And it is, and it, you know, it's so crazy because there's, you know, teachers here from everywhere in all different grade levels, and I teach 7-year-olds, right? But just because they're 7 doesn't mean that they can't do amazing things. So, and my students have done amazing things. Like this year with Hip Africa, like they actually reached out to me through Twitter and said, you know, we need 60 kids to get meals for this holiday, or they won't have, like, they're not going to go home with meals over the holiday. And we said, okay, you know, I told my students, and they were like, well, let's do something. What can we do? Let's make a fundraiser. Let's sell buttons. Let's do this. Let's do that. And they raised $700 in a week because they knew what was behind it. They knew. They saw the faces. They saw the kids at this school, and they knew. And we stopped everything. Like, we're a traveling class, so we were traveling to Alaska, and it was like, plans have changed. Like, get back on the plane. We're going to Kenya, this little town called Kamili, Kenya, and we're going to learn everything we can about the school and about, you know, what they're going through. But I've seen, because I'm in a K through 8 school, and so because I'm in a K through 8 school, I see them in 6th grade. I see them in 8th grade. I see them as they go forward, and they remember the work that they've done in my room. I mean, I had an 8th grader, you know, not too long ago, come in my exhibition. To me, that's so powerful too, when the students, they come back. So the middle schoolers will come back, they'll come in the exhibition and they'll say, oh my gosh, and this class in particular, he was like, I remember when I was in your class and we bought an acre of land in the rainforest. I'm like, that was your idea, Caleb. Like, you're the one that wanted the acre of land in the rainforest. And we adopted like 4 different animals from the WWF, and we did all these amazing things. And I'm not the one that wanted to adopt animals, and, you know, so we could get the stuffed animal and buy an acre of land in the rainforest and have bake sales and all of these things. Like, these were all their ideas. They all came from them. So when I see it in their work as they go forward, as they're in the upper elementary school and they go to middle school, like, they still have that drive and passion inside of them because they know what's possible and they understand that, like, they have that voice, they have that power. And I feel like that's such an amazing thing for kids to realize.
And like when you say you're the lead learner,
yeah.
Some people might say a bake sale, they don't understand that you have, you know, used the secret sauce to get the mathematics, to get the writing, to get the comprehension, the problem solving,
That's
under
the
the guise
That's
of
all
the bake
the
sale,
trickery.
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because that is like in so many of these crazy things that we'll do, and I'm like, but you don't understand. Like, so the new student that came to me within the last month, he actually was in our classroom 3 days, and he looked around and he goes, "Do you guys ever do math in here?" I'm not kidding. And my students looked at him and they were like, "What are you talking about?" And like they like were doing this to all the things they had done, and he was like, "Oh." And they were like, "We just don't use the math books all the time, but we always do math." Right. So for him, that was really eye-opening. Like, there is so much trickery in deeper learning that I can get my students to do so much math and writing for days so they can film a green screen.
Right.
It's a 3-minute green screen, and they will write endlessly to publish their blog. They will write endlessly, you know? So yeah, it's that secret sauce. I like that.
Absolutely.
So this might be a good time. This is such a wonderful dialogue, and I know we're going to open up questions for everyone to share. Why don't we turn to a different partner? Part of what we're doing here is we're trying to get seeds of ideas that we can bring back to our own practice and our own schools. So share one thing you want to celebrate that's inspired you so far from the conversation, and one wondering you have or question you have, and then we'll open it back up. So if you could find another partner, introduce yourself. It'll take about 2 minutes. Celebrate something that inspired you and a wondering you have. Hopefully you made a new connection. You were able to do a little processing of what's really striking you and what you want to bring back to your own communities and your own practice, and hopefully some wonderings that are bubbling up of what you'd like to learn from this amazing group of educators. So I will hand it back to them, and they'll pull questions and support some dialogue in here.
So this is a huge problem, and I joke like, oh, third grade is where creativity goes to die because of like all the testing, right? Yeah. So I am happy to say that I am going to third grade with my students, and so I'm looping with them, and I'm staying self-contained because that's my happy place. And I'm really excited that I can be in that grade level so that I can show those teachers, like, look, it can be done. Right? Because my students read more than any other second grader. They write more than any other second grader. They do higher, deeper math than other second graders, like at least in my school. And it's through this deeper learning. So don't tell me that they need to read more passages. They will read as many passages as you possibly want them to ever read, but they will be within the context of our project-based learning unit. And then therefore, they're excited. Like, I can literally put a passage, like a third grade ready, like we're gonna annotate and do all of that stuff passage in a rotation. But because it's on, like if we're doing, let's say we're doing the world water crisis, right? And so they're gonna read a passage about the world water crisis, they're gonna annotate it, they're going to turn and talk with their partners, and then they're gonna do a reflection on the back. I can put that in a station called PBL. And they're like, oh, okay. But it's because it's around like that topic that means so much to them. So I feel like you're absolutely right, this is a big problem, and I feel like there just needs to be more of us out there showing like it can be done, it does work, let me show you how. But you're absolutely right.
I felt like I was almost in a battle with my school/education. It was very, it was kind of awkward, really. Like I gathered all my teachers, the school director, all the administration levels, and I told them, like, this is why I specifically came here, this is what I want to do. And so I guess me specifically actually wanting to run off with the model and wanting to be more specific, it was kind of like a shock to the school almost. And so I kind of transferred because of that reason. That's why I believe in like policy work, and there also is the like in school work, but the school just felt very limited to the state standards they had to meet, like all these things, and they're like, you're outside of that. It feels good, it looks nice, but it's stepping away from the status quo basically. It was challenging, however, it led me to want to seek more for myself, because seeking that and actually taking the step towards freedom, towards being more in charge of what and how I was learning, I got introduced to the High School for Culinary Arts, to High Tech High, and so yeah, we don't know what we don't know, and so even asking the question like, how can I like take this shackle or this thing that's limited me, away. But it was very, I don't know. I just graduated high school like last year, so this whole experience has been fun. I can say that has been a challenging. I might have had some awkwardness with people who were trying to educate me. However, I always knew that I was very confident that I could be where I'm at today. And I actually believe, as crazy as this may sound, my story is not unique. There's a lot of the same stories, just different characters. And so I really believe that there's geniuses within the hood that are in statistics that are shown that they can't be like a superintendent, but they just aren't given the opportunities. And it takes people like y'all to work with me to want to make a change. But yeah, it was challenging but fun. Nothing about us without us. And that's the thing that kind of gets us, is that, no offense, but all these adults want to make decisions about how we're in school for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, all of these things. But it's challenging when y'all are like, we want to put y'all at the epicenter. This is about you, and run off. But when we actually put ourselves at the epicenter, try to exercise that power and that influence, that's where it starts to get kind of like, tricky. But I really do believe that if adults can take a risk, trust, be open to wanting to work with young people. Because as I said, like, I was homeless. I was skipping school every day. Like, I was not on the list of like, oh, this school should work with the student and put like resources and time in. Nah. But I believe the world will face a worse consequence staying on the path that we're on now instead of aiming to break away from it. So nothing about us without us. And yeah, like, how can we have more students at the table?
I think too, like, to say what you were saying, showing, like, students need to be seen, like, students need to be shown, and they need to feel what success feels like, right? Like, they need to know that they can be successful. Like, he had people that trusted in him, but also, like, he must have felt that success at the beginning in order to help him keep going. If you haven't read, like, Ethic of Excellence by Ron Berger, I'm, like, a little obsessed with it. But he talks so much about transformational, the success and doing excellent work can be so transformational in children. And so I think, letting them feel that, I think, is a big deal.
Something you said interesting. You said kids don't always believe in themselves. It brings me back to this original idea about what are we doing post-pandemic, because especially around social emotional wellness. And one of the tenets, of course, is the self-efficacy, right? So I think that it's up to us to empower them, to mentor them, and to show them that they can be successful. Kids don't always know. Adults don't know. My wife will tell you that, and don't laugh, I struggle with public speaking, right? I don't feel like I'm really good at that, right? So I'm always seeking, what is it? Not reinforce, reassurance.
Reassurance.
Right?
Yeah.
Reassurance, right? And I'm a little older than him. He's let us know a few times today, Walter, right? So, I mean, it's in all of us. I think that we have to call that out, right? We have to call that out, and then we have to be very intentional about how we support our babies around that, especially that self-efficacy piece, right? And couldn't deeper learning bring us out of it, right? Couldn't it bring us out of it if you really think about it? Because the traditional setting, at least in Los Angeles, I don't know about you guys, we're seeing 40% chronic absenteeism across the board. I don't care what socioeconomic status you're at, right? It's the craziest thing in the world. I think one thing is, I have this one theory, it's not proven. We taught kids how to not go to school during the pandemic, and now it becomes the norm. We spend a lot of time on mass regrading, right? Saying, oh, you don't necessarily have to, pass all these exams, but if you show a little bit of growth, then you pass. We had a moratorium on failing here in California for a couple of years. So I'm going to be honest with you. You would have got Andre Spicer at 18 years old in the pandemic. You weren't given Fs, and I would have never went, because it was just a lot more interesting hanging out on the street. It really was, right? So to your point, right, we have to figure out how we're going to capture that learning loss. First, we have to call it what it is. It's learning loss. right? I know there's some debate on what we call it, but if I didn't get what I should have gotten during that time, it's a loss, right? That's just my 2 cents on your point. Thank you. I would say yes and no. Not an entire school, but we do have STEAM magnets and STEAM schools of that nature that follow that pattern but like say a high-tech high that really embraces the deeper learning. But system-wide, no. It's still a struggle for us to embrace it because, we're a big bureaucracy, we're a big machine, and everybody, like to Kristin's point, we're very worried about your pacing, right? We're extremely worried about how you showcase that learning. We haven't really all bought into we can show the same standards have been taught and learned by this example. We'd rather see it on a traditional black and white. So, and complete transparency, we still have a ways to go.
Well, and I think it's gonna take a while to get there too, because there's a big, there's looking at the project and looking at project-based learning. Is it the main dish or is it the dessert, right? The main course or the dessert. So you have a lot of teachers who are doing it like the dessert, and so
Right.
they're showing that, like, look, my child learned, and it's like, really? No.
Right.
Like, that's not, it's not up to par. So I think that's a big problem too, is like, having teachers doing it the proper way and doing it like the main course, the main dish, like this is what we're living and breathing every day. And we just so happen to have these projects as an outcome. Not, we have exhibition in 2 weeks, we're gonna stop all learning and now we're just gonna do projects for the next 2 weeks. I mean, it's an issue even at my own school. And as much as we're trying to hammer it home, we're still having an issue with it. So it's
You know what else we
hard.
do? We piecemeal a lot. So we have a lot of mentorships. Mentorship is the big sexy word now for us. Every school, every administrator. I have mentors, right? Mentees, rather. Then we have some spots of these specialized schools with the project-based learning. Then we have lots and lots of CTE pathways, right? Very interesting things like this performing arts and so on. But together and saying this is at scale, this is how we do it. No, not yet. But we're piecemealing like crazy, man.
But keep doing that. That's better than nothing. You
Right.
had your hand raised. So there's some use of them. My administration and district would kill me if I didn't. So there's some use of them. My whole thing is, okay, so if I'm going to use benchmark, right, and I'm teaching you how to read and we're teaching you how to annotate, and I have to read like the colored speckled egg, why do I need to read that when my students right now are like learning about the aurora borealis and we're learning about Togo and the Great Serum Race of 1925. And so for them, it makes more sense to read a passage about that and annotate that and answer questions about that and think deeply about that. So my day looks very different than a normal classroom teacher, but I still have like a serious literacy block. So our day starts at 8 and we have lunch at 10:30, and so we have morning meeting at 10:20, and by 8:20 our day has started. So we have 8:20 till 10 o'clock where we're doing our reading, our writing. I'm pulling small groups.
Hey.
They're working in rotations, but we're kind of getting away from rotations. And we started I have a very amazing class this year. So we do like responsibilities so they can like pick and choose their order, because guess what? Now, if they're in rotations, they're not with who they're blogging with. So now they can't work on their blog because they're not with their blogging partner, which they've picked, I don't pick. Or now they can't work on their slides that they're creating for a presentation because that's a different group that they've created. So, but it's still very much like a regular like literacy reading block, because I still do need to teach them how to read. I'm still doing whole group. I'm still doing read alouds, which are my favorite part of the day, and we're still responding to books. We are using benchmark. They still have to do iReady. They still have to do some of our computer programs, but we just fit it in everywhere that we can. And I'm still teaching math, and I'm still teaching to the standards. I'm just doing it a little bit of a different way. And we pull the books out when we need to. But yeah, my old principal for a couple of years, like we didn't even buy the books. So I'm just used to not even having them. So I'll use them and they're great practice, but the kids would much rather write on the desks with dry erase markers and, than work in a textbook. So. Well, there's a couple of different reasons I feel like that is. First of all, the know-it-all, like the wherewithal, right? So like, I'm able to do this type of work. I've been doing it for a really long time. And before I did, this deeper learning in my classroom, I was a regular classroom teacher, and I was doing piecemeal and pulling things here and there. And over those years where I was pulling things in here and there, like, I built that rapport and that trust with my administration. So once I had that trust with my administration, like, I will never forget, I'd go to her in the morning and I'd be like, okay, if you come in my room today at this time, and she'd be like, okay. And then I'd be like, I'm wearing overalls today because we're planting. And then finally she came, and she was like, please stop telling me like what you're doing today. Like,
Right.
It's okay. Like, so I never felt like if somebody walks in at 10:15 and we're doing a read aloud instead of doing a different element of my literacy block. Like, it's okay. If my students are blogging, it's okay. It's still literacy. They're still writing. They're still working on grammar and editing and introductions. I mean, everything you need in a 5-paragraph essay, they're putting in their blogs. So I think it was that trust, like building that trust. And I do feel like, it shouldn't take years and years and years to build trust, right? Like, so our administrators, they need to have a little trust and faith within us, and they need to understand that we are going to be failing forward, right? Like, and the fact that, like, doing this work is hard, right? So there's a lot of people that just don't want to do it. They don't want to put in the effort because it is so much easier to go on Blender and to follow the scope and sequence that the district has given them for math, and for them to follow every single thing in our reading series benchmark, and to just teach every single day like that. And I feel like those things are put there for brand new teachers, right? For them to fall back on and for them to use as they're learning the profession of teaching. And I still use those things, but I just don't rely on them like a Bible.
Right.
And I feel like we need to have some administrators that understand that that's why they're there. They're there as a resource. And I had this argument with the curriculum planner who bought Benchmark for our district. And she said, but all the teachers wanted that. They all voted for that. More teachers voted for that than any other program. And I said, that is because it is chock full. It is an amazing resource. It has so many things for me, so many things. And we thought that we would be using it as a resource, not a Bible that if you come in my room and I'm not on page 74 reading from the script, then I'm not going to get my hand smacked.
Tell us how you really feel, Kristin.
Oh, no, don't, like, listen. And it was funny because at the end of that meeting, it was a virtual meeting, and she left, and I looked at my district superintendent, who was there backing me up, and my principal, and I said, then I don't think I can be a teacher. And he messaged me separately, I know that was hard. Don't worry. I've got faith in you. We're going to get through this together. But again, support and trust from my administration and from my district, knowing that I could speak my mind in that meeting with the lady who bought that program that is now, hovering over people watching them use it. So we have a long road ahead of us. We just have to keep fighting. We just have to keep fighting. Because if I have to be a teacher and teach the way that, that traditional way where I'm opening up and I'm just following the day, I will go work at Costco. They make $19 an hour or something. I can't.
Want to share any closing thoughts?
I'm just hearing that, and I hear this all the time, a lot of people on the different levels, we all think or kind of in the same way. I just don't understand the barrier, the gap. And I don't know, I might tell people, I don't believe this is rocket science. I really don't believe it is rocket science to cultivate a human's genius, to show them that they could go from an adolescent to a successful and thriving adult. I really don't believe that it should be rocket science. So just this experience and hearing the different perspectives, I really am more inspired, more motivated to work with y'all, with our communities,
Yes.
and create a world where all youth are thriving. So I'm just going away with a lot of new ideas, and so thank y'all for being here, for being vulnerable. Even if we're barely pushing the needle through the haystack, we're still making progress. So shout out to all of us.
Yes.
I think student voice is the best way to end, Coach.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for sharing your brilliance, being so transparent and humble and honest and courageous and sharing your truth. That was a beautiful session. We appreciate you sharing so much your stories and your experience. So one more round of applause.